when you learn from someone who's been there, you'll be a better person. And when you start to forget that you're a representative, you're not the king. You represent the people of your district, and you do what's best for them and the people of the state of New York.
39 years.
Yep.
In 2 years from now, are you going to run again or are you going to retire?
Let's hope the good Lord lets me live a little longer.
Okay, so we'll take that as a yes, you'll run again?
I make no commitments.
Okay.
Not at this age in life, Hank.
And how many grandkids now?
17.
Wow.
And 2 great-grandchildren.
Wow.
Well, I got 1 great-grandchild, and the other one is coming in March.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
You were in the military as a career before this.
23 years.
Wow. Tell us about that.
I started out at I thought I was 18 years old when all my guys in high school were going away with brother Patrick. And I went too. But in 1965, I found out that I was born in 28, not 26. But I served in World War II. Then I went back to Fort Riley, Kansas, and I went to OCS and I became a 2nd lieutenant on December the 17th, 1948. And that was a complete change. You know, from being, I was the 1st sergeant of a company, and to go back and then be the leader, it was a big change. But I was very fortunate. The time I served as an enlisted man, which was 4 years, I learned to respect those who worked with me, for me, and against me. And to say the most, I was blessed. I commanded a company, 208 enlisted men and
Wow.
5 officers. I commanded a company in combat. I commanded a company in the Cold War. I commanded a battalion in Europe.
And how many people was that?
Battalion is 1,500. Those days, I don't know what it is today.
Wow.
But our company, I commanded a company in an armored division, the longest of any person. 3 solid years, March 54 to March of 57.
And where was that?
Germany, 2nd Armored Division.
Wow.
Hell on wheels.
That's what they called it?
That's what they call it. But the point about it is that if you let the Army help you, you'll become a better individual. Whether you stay in or get out, you can bring home stuff and carry over in your civilian life because you learned a lot of discipline and respect. Respect for yourself and respect for others.
Was your going into the Army early an accident or an accident on purpose that you enlisted early?
No, everybody was going, and Brother Patrick said, I'm leaving. He was a Christian brother. And everybody in the class went. And so it was amazing. When I went to Fort Dix, I knew how to walk because I belonged to CBLS LaSalle, and that was high school. So you know how to walk and march and turn and that there. I was ahead of the game. And I think the hardest part was going to California, and you get on a ship and you're going overseas, and you have no idea. Someone said, we're going to New Guinea. I didn't know anybody on the ship that ever heard of New Guinea before. So it was, but we were going on a mission for the United States of America and its citizens. And there are things I remember. There's things I don't want to remember. I'm very proud of serving 23 years. I served with some of the best people in the world. I served with young officers, junior officers, senior officers. I served with general officers that you know, if they'd throw a grenade, somebody threw the grenade, these generals would have fallen on it rather than one of their enlisted men lose their life. And it was, I learned so much in the military. I think that's a lot that's helped me in my success in public office. If you think about it, Hank, and you knew this from before, in '63, John F. Kennedy came to Europe. I was selected as the Army's project officer. I mean, the memories of that trip were astonishing. John F. Kennedy treated everybody on that trip as if they were close family friends. And then I was called on in '65 to go down to Selma, Alabama, in response to the 7th of March of Blood on the Bridge. And we brought in all the troops that we needed. Wallace didn't want to activate his own guard unit. We convinced the higher-ups convinced the president that it was time to move in with troops. And we did. And we had that march, the 21st to the 25th of March, 1965. And if you think about it, we had one major accident, one killed. And that was a person from the Michigan Auto Union. And everybody was told to go down this street. Don't go back on any other street. Well, she and a few others in a pickup truck went down this street, went into a gin mill, something happened and she was shot and killed. Sorry. But those who obeyed the law got out of there.
Now, you mentioned JFK in
Yeah.
Germany. Did you get to meet him?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you the funny thing about it is, when we were in Bonn one night, he was having dinner with Adenauer, at that time the president. And they said, all clear. We had a code number, but it meant all clear. So we're all sitting there in our shorts having a beer. Someone comes in and said, who the hell's got the Dinkerlager? And I jumped up and said, here's one. And he said, I guess you're the major, aren't you? I said, yes, sir. And you know, he was down to earth. I mean, when we landed in Ireland, I couldn't estimate how many people were there. I mean, he was their idol. And how he treated the troops, you know, I've never been that close to a president.
And he was a young guy, right?
He was young.
Yeah.
And he was a veteran.
Right.
You know, he talked to the troops like he was talking, like you and I are talking, Hank. I remember when we went into, we were going to go to lunch, and he goes in the mess hall, and someone says, where are you going to eat? He says, at the table. And so some full colonel, some more said, sir, they're sitting here, General so-and-so, General so-and-so. He said, Colonel, no disrespect, but if I want to have generals, all I got to do is blow the whistle and I'll have lots of generals. So he says, looked at me and he says, how about this table over here? All the GIs went over there. They all jumped up. And the president looked at him and he said, what's that? He says, it's a camera. He says, you know what? If you don't press that button, you're not going to be able to send this to Mom and say, Mom, this is the president. And he got a picture taken. The kid was like, he was in tears, you know.
Sure.
But he just had that touch.
You also served in the Pentagon, right?
Yep.
Tell us about that.
Well, I guess the Pentagon was a crowning blow. I was in a department that had 98 officers. I was the only one without a college degree. And one guy didn't like that. And General Allen said, I pick who comes here and who leaves here. Larkin will stay and you're going. I was very blessed in my military career. I can honestly say that in 23 years, I met one West Pointer that I didn't think cut the mustard. But I wasn't the only one. When I said class of 50, I had 5 or 6 others say, oh, I know Cloyce. So I wasn't alone with him. But as a whole, those people that I met in 23 years that were service schools clearly set a tame for you. But there's a lot of things that I think are... I remember we had a place called the Apple Orchard. It was at Munsan-ni in Korea. That's where we were stationed. This compound was where everybody that was going to work on the peace talks with North Korea and China. And the funniest thing is one day we're getting ready to go across the pontoon bridge, and somebody in the press looked at General Ridgway. Ridgway always wore his grenades. He was an airborne officer. And this guy said to General Ridgway, why do you wear those phony grenades? He said, oh, they're phony. Yeah, I said, it makes you look good, but it's still phony. He ripped off the grenade and threw it in the water, and those fish went all over the place. He said, would you like the other one, the other phony? He said, now, take that dirty vehicle of yours and go back and wash it, because we're going across this pond and we're class act people.
So it wasn't a phony grenade?
No, it was not a phony grenade. And in my tent, there was 3 of us in this tent. Arnold Galiffa, who was a quarterback from West Point, died, about 59, 60, something like that. And C. Turner's, his father was Vice Admiral. And he didn't get in the Naval Academy, he got into West Point. And he was a Signal Corps officer. And the 3 of us shared a tent. And Galiffa used to go back on the weekend because Penny Ridgway never saw him play football. So he had to go back and play football on the weekend. So, you know, those are some of the things that you get. But, you know, as a whole, I hear people say, I hated the Army. Well, you do this here, you do that. We did a lot of things. Biggest thing was, if you were an officer, you had a responsibility. If you were an NCO, you had a responsibility. And you learn from that. I had a letter from a gentleman from Goodyear. His son came to Germany and he was drafted. And he didn't like it. And so I straightened him up and put him in a room where he really didn't like it. And when he left and went home 18 months later, I got a letter from his father and said, I sent you a boy. Thank you for sending me a man back home. And it was respect for one another. I was very proud of the officers I served with. As I said, you'll always find one apple in the barrel. But I think, I've said it a couple of times in our discussion here, my honest opinion was that if you treated the troops right, the troops took good care of you, and then your unit operated better. The company I had at First Company was the worst company in Japan in 1949. In 1950, they were #1. Because we sat down and said, we're a family. We brought the wives into it. Profanity wasn't acceptable. Leadership was acceptable. People going to get their education, writing to their families. So when we went to Korea, we were prepared. We were prepared to protect one another. Have to forget me, I had dental work.
No problem. You told me many years ago about one tragedy you had when you were, I think, a lieutenant in Korea, and you had a driver,
Got
a
killed.
young man, and
Robert Maples,
that has stuck with you the rest of your life.
August the 4th, 10:30, 1950.
He was driving you, and
We were moving north to go into another place. And they said that everything was clear. And all of a sudden the Jeeps are blowing up. I hollered, out of the vehicles! Got out of the vehicle, he went into a ditch, and that grenade that was in that ditch killed him. Young man.
and you told me that you went personally to the family,
Yes.
and you still
When I
stay in
come
touch
back.
with the family.
Yep. And his mother, this was an all-black unit.
Yeah.
His mother showed me a letter. And the letter said, you know, Mom, for a whitey, Lieutenant Larkin and Lieutenant Lewis aren't bad guys. And she wouldn't give it to me. And of course, we had a library fixed up for him. They named it for him. We went out and raised the money. And this was a kid that was going to go back. He was going to get out of the service in '51. He was going to go back to college, go to ROTC and become an officer. And he said to Lewis and I, he said, I'm going to come back and harass you.
Mm-hmm.
I never forget him. Someone will say, well, who was the 7th or 8th? You don't remember that. But once again, the respect of one another. When he got it, other people in the company were just sad as I was, because he meant something. He was a structure in the company.
And this was 1951?
He got killed in 1950.
50.
We went to Korea the 15th of July, 50, and he got killed on the 4th of August.
Was it unusual to have all black units in
those days, yes.
Yeah.
Remember, though, the 26th of July, 1948, President Truman said desegregate. But here it was 1950 when he got killed, and it was an all-black unit.
If I could switch to some local issues for a minute.
Yes.
Lieutenant Lou Allen, who you knew,
Yes.
and Captain Esposito.
I never appreciated that judge. I wrote him a letter and he told me that he didn't need advice from outsiders. Yeah.
So
Of course,
obviously-
he left Fort Bragg immediately.
So obviously you feel that the two victims should have been given Purple Hearts, which they were denied.
I think they should have been given Purple Hearts, and I think that this sergeant that did this should have gone to prison for life.
And I think I just read he passed away recently.
Yes.
Yeah. Might you be writing to new President Trump urging him to do something on this now, since he's very pro-military?
Not only that, but I'm going to let them get their feet wet in office. You know, because right now, you got some real good people in there. You got Mathis, Commandant of the Marine Corps. You have Kelly. You have Flynn. These are generals that have been in combat. And I want to get a message to them to reconsider this. These people were killed. If you remember years ago, there was a fellow who played football for the Cardinals. I think they were St. Louis in those days. And there was friendly fire. They gave them a Purple Heart. But this wasn't friendly fire. This was enemy fire as far as I'm concerned.
Sure.
And I will go ahead and ask them to reconsider.
Good, okay. Legoland, what are your thoughts on Legoland?
Legoland is a local decision. I think the public having their voice heard And when it's all finished, I personally believe that it will help the community. I don't know, I do know because Goshen's not in my district anymore, but Haverstraw is, and Haverstraw, they voted it down. Now I hear people telling me, we should not have turned it down. I said, you were the biggest, one of the biggest ones that were saying, no, no, no. You gotta look at all aspects of this. I don't have all the details, so if I were to tell you they should do it, they shouldn't do it, people will say you don't live in Goshen. But I live in Orange County, and this is gonna affect Orange County.
Sure.
It's gonna affect taxes. How about all these kids coming home in the summer for college? Where are they gonna get those temporary people? Right here in our community.
Right. Salary hikes for state legislators?
I would have voted against it. The reason I would have voted against it, because when you were running, you knew what the salary was. But don't forget, you do a survey through your system, and you find out how many people would work for a company and go 18 years without a pay raise. That's a long time. And I think that sometimes, and now they don't know what they want to do. They want to talk about 4-year terms, and then a 4-year term and outside income you can make $5,000. How about an attorney going to court? I'm not an attorney, but I have someone, as you know, in my family who's an attorney. I don't know if he go to court for $5,000. I don't know. But I'm just saying. And the other thing is, you could only stay in office for 8 years.
So it'd be 2 4-year terms.
That's what some of them are talking about. So my looking at it at my age and saying, who's going to leave their business and go work for the government for 8 years? When you come back from 8 years, I go back to you and say, I'm back, I'm ready to start doing this. And you say, who are you? Oh, I used to be the #1 writer. That's 2 years, that's two owners ago.
Okay.
So it's a, you know, the question is, I want to be able to have a legislature that encompasses all, whether you're a doctor, a lawyer, a pharmacist, a beautician, real estate. So you get a mustering of everybody that could go back and say, I was there. And I think that we're missing that. I just heard of somebody who said he wanted a raise, but he didn't want to vote for it. Well, then you're not being honest with the people.
The Port Authority recently took the $20 million out of the capital budget.
We're fighting it.
You are?
Yes.
And do you think you can get them back to put it back in?
We're going to do everything that we can. It was in there, was programmed for it. You know, we're now going to have another airline coming here, as you know that. They'll be here in a couple of weeks to confirm everything. We're not giving them a chance. We're putting restrictions on them, and then we're asking them to come here and help our economy.
We talked before we started taping about discussion of putting a Metro North train station right at Woodbury Common.
Yes. If you remember back in '98, we had a lot of talk about it, and they were against it. You know, they were. But if you look at what they plan, there's a great thing. We're working with the MTA, and we're working with local groups, and if they did, this would be right on Woodbury Commons ground.
And there was talk years ago about putting one right at Stewart.
Yes.
Running a
think
spur
right now,
from Salisbury Mills.
Yeah, but I don't hear anybody singing that song.
Would you support it or wait till more traffic comes in?
I think you need to get the traffic. I think if you put the commons in, you know, people will recognize it. And then they'll say, hey, if we do this, we'll increase this other aspect of it. If you know, you've reported it, that in the Harriman somebody wants to make another village, you know, this would be apropos for them.
Okay.
You work in the city, you come back home, you can shop, and you're home in 5 minutes. You can also go back and forth to the city.
And it would alleviate motor vehicle traffic.
Yes.
Right. President Trump, there are those who think that he's going too far now with foreign policy, tweeting national issues, telling people off, things he did during the campaign he's still doing now.
Two things. He told you what he was going to do. He's now the president. I hear these people say he shouldn't do this, he shouldn't do that. In the Post this morning, in the Daily News today, there's a letter in there that says, people forget what Obama did. And he put a 90-day restriction on Iran in Iraq. Oh, but that was then. But he never told you he was going to do it. He just did it with an executive order. This president said, this is what I'm going to do. And the other thing is, I believe this is the president. I think if he's elected, I really believe we should support the president. I never heard George Bush one statement about Obama after he was out of office. Obama's been every day talking about Trump. The question is, if you remember, no, you're too young, Hank, in 45, George Patton, what did he say at the Battle of the Bulge? Leader, get the hell out of the way, is exactly words. That's what we need today. The American public, I can tell you people that you know that are not flaming right-wingers, but they say, you know, I just spent $140,000 for my 2 kids' education. They can't get a job. Well, is it President's fault? You know, I don't see, I think one of the things we have to do is to start to look at, and what he said is America is America. I mean, my great-grandparents came from Ireland, right? They had to go through Ellis Island, and maybe in your family the same thing. So why should we change anything? I mean, do I think we need to smooth some of it? Yes. But don't forget, this man told you in the beginning, this is what I'm going to do. Do I think he tweets too much? I don't know. I don't tweet at all. But the question is, I would rather someone tell me up front what he's doing. Now, like the article today talks about the Yemen strikes that they did at Yemen, right? Well, what about it? This was approved by Obama's people back before the election, right? So what do? Now the wind-up is someone was killed. But did you notice that without telling the press, and they're mad about it, he went to Dover 2 days ago, and he didn't go to the casket first. It's reported that he stood back with somebody in his family and let the family go to the casket, and then he went to the casket. Respect for the family. So, you know, maybe he's a little rough around the edges, but he's not a normal politician that is in Washington. He's doing things that he thinks is best because he said, this is what I told the people I was going to do. He's doing it.
So going full circle as we wind this up, happy birthday.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. And we've known each other since 1970, I think.
Yep.
So that's a couple of years. You're not going to say now whether you're going to run again in 2 more
Oh,
years.
I don't count anything. I'm going to let the good Lord decide what I'm going to do.
Okay.
But I have to tell you, representing the people of the state of New York, and especially in my district, when I was in the Assembly, when I was the town supervisor, and in the Senate since 1991, I have exerted all of my energy to improve the quality of life for the people I represent and the rest of the state of New York. Because this is not a joke. This is not a game. This is an entitlement that the people of your district have given to you, and you are responsible to them and their families.